Good afternoon. I'm Brent Harden. We're interrupting your program to bring you a special report. Republican gubernatorial candidate Tom Foley is about to hold a news conference to discuss the official ballot numbers released in the governor's race last week. Those numbers, of course, showed Democrat Dan Malloy winning that election. Now, we're going to shortly take you out to that conference at the Goodwin Hotel in Hartford. And as we wait, we can recap for a moment. You'll remember that the election last Tuesday was marred by a ballot snafu in Bridgeport that held up the numbers from that city. Still Wednesday, without the Bridgeport numbers coming in, Secretary of the State Susan Bysiewicz announced that former Stamford Mayor Dan Malloy had won the election. She said it was unofficial at that point, but she called the race for Malloy. She came under fire for making that announcement before all the votes had been counted. And she said that at the time Malloy was ahead by 3,100 votes, enough not to trigger a recount. Okay, Tom Foley is speaking now. Let's hear what he has to say.
Has been concluded, and that Dr. Pettit, at least for this period of time, has some completion of this trial. Hey, when I spoke to you on Friday, I told you I was not confident enough in the reported election results to make any decisions. I said the citizens of Connecticut deserve certainty about the results of last Tuesday's elections. This week I have had a team of people going over the election results town by town to see if there were any further reporting errors, evidence of fraud, or anything else that would change the outcome of the governor's race. I also had a legal team analyze legal challenges to the results if we believed that the will of the voters had not been honored on Election Day. The legal team has identified two options for challenges. The first is to challenge the photocopied ballots in Bridgeport and 6 other towns. We don't know the count of these ballots, but if they were eliminated, it could change the outcome of the race. The second is, given the irregularities reported in Bridgeport and several other towns, asking for a recount or a revote. The team looking into the integrity of the voting results made a very thorough analysis with the aid of specialists, both from inside and outside Connecticut. I am both happy and disappointed with their report. I'm happy for Connecticut that despite numerous reported irregularities, including a bag of ballots being counted on Thursday in Bridgeport, they found no credible evidence of fraudulent voting. I am disappointed that the team reported a chaotic situation on Election Day and its aftermath in Bridgeport. They believe the reported Bridgeport results are unreliable, but not from any willful behavior. They also believe the number of votes by which the Bridgeport results are likely to be wrong would not, on its own, change the outcome of the race. The team double-checked with towns across the state to ensure that the Secretary of the State's office is correctly reporting the results from other towns. They looked for reporting anomalies to determine the likelihood that towns might significantly amend their results. They have determined that towns are likely to amend their results, but not by more than several hundred votes in total. Despite the remaining uncertainty of the Bridgeport results and possible amendments by some towns, I am confident that a recount that included the photocopied ballots would not change the outcome of the governor's race. Once all this information was available to me this morning, deciding what to do was easy. I have told my team that I am not willing to pursue a legal challenge to exclude photocopied ballots. Despite their irregularity, I believe they do represent legitimate votes of well-intended voters and must be included in Tuesday's results. So the election on Tuesday, although very close, was a conclusive victory for Dan Malloy, and this result should not be questioned. I hope my supporters will accept my word on this. As soon as I am done with this press conference, I will call Dan Malloy to congratulate him on winning the election and wish him good luck. I entered elective politics after giving it a lot of thought. I made the decision to run for office after concluding that win or lose, I was better off for having tried. That has held true. It has been an honor to run for governor of Connecticut. I have made many new friends. I have learned new skills and gained important insights. Even though I will not be serving as your governor, I hope to use what I've learned to help our great state. I have many people to thank. I want to thank Mark Bowden for his hard work and friendship as my running mate. I want to thank my extraordinary wife, Leslie, who has been so supportive and understanding of the demands on a candidate, particularly a first-time candidate. I want to thank my incredibly good and dedicated campaign team, especially Justin Clark, my campaign manager. I want to thank my supporters all around this state, and I particularly want to thank the more than 500,000 people who voted for me last Tuesday. Finally, I want to thank all of you in the press corps. We have been fellow passengers on an interesting journey. I have enjoyed getting to know you and look forward to our continuing friendships. And without exception, I have found you serious, hardworking, and well-intended, and only occasionally temperamental. You have treated me very fairly and covered this race well. I learned early on that it is a mistake not to take your questions after a press conference. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have now. Well, I'm done with this governor's race for sure. Yeah. I have no idea.
What do you think of what Mr. Malloy is doing now as far as following this?
You know, I didn't mention it in my remarks here, but I think certainly what happened in Bridgeport should be looked into, because I think, despite what I've said today, the spectacle in Bridgeport does call into question the integrity of our voting results here in Connecticut. And this race, 5,600 votes apart, would not have been affected, in my opinion, based on what we were able to learn by the results in Bridgeport. But had it been closer, and it could have been, it might have called into question the result, and that should not happen, particularly here in Connecticut.
Is there a time that you progressed languages and did not want to concede?
I'm sorry?
Is there a time in the last few hours or days that you did not want to concede?
No, for me the issue has always been who won the race. And so there was never any question of whether I would concede or when the answer was known. But I frankly didn't know the answer until just this morning.
Bob, in terms of the voting party chairman, that we were talking about perhaps pursuing this legally, do you think it is turned up that perhaps Richmond is now the governor?
It's certainly possible, because in 2 days and very few people in Bridgeport were actually available, very few of the officials. So I would not, I think what we learned over the weekend was sufficient for my making the decision I had to make. But I do think it's probably a good idea to look into what happened in Bridgeport and make sure it doesn't happen again.
I presume, Tom, that the people you have looking into this have some expertise or experience in Connecticut elections. Would they tell you that these kinds of things happen in every election? It's only when they're close that they get magnified like this? We saw it in the second congressional district twice in the past 20 years.
Well,
their ballots can be challenged, and it looks like there was mistakes.
Yeah, actually I was quite surprised that there was a very high level of confidence that there probably was no significant fraud or voter fraud that would have changed these results. I believe that the machine counting system we have here in Connecticut is very reliable. I think the fact that we had some photocopied ballots that were hand counted introduces an error factor that isn't possible with the machine counting, and that was introduced, unfortunately, on Tuesday in Bridgeport and several other towns. I think we should make sure that it doesn't happen again. But we had an awful lot of people contact us saying that they had seen things that they thought were irregular and might have been voter fraud, but in chasing them down, none of them was significant, and they certainly wouldn't have affected enough votes to change the outcome of the governor's race.
Would you consider a job with the Malloy administration if we came up and asked you to help with that?
All right, that is Republican gubernatorial candidate Tom Foley, or I guess we could say former Republican gubernatorial candidate Tom Foley, essentially finally conceding the race a week after the election, announcing he will not challenge the outcome of the election. He said after their investigation, they've determined that neither the irregularities they believe they uncovered statewide nor the photocopied ballots in Bridgeport would affect the outcome of the race. He said he believed that the photocopied ballots, bottom line, do represent legitimate votes by well-intentioned voters in Bridgeport, so he will not challenge. Now, having said all that, the Republican Party is asking for federal and state investigations of this election. State Republican Chairman Chris Healy has hired well-known attorney Ross Garber. Garber has already sent letters to the state's attorney and the U.S. Attorney's Office asking for an investigation of this election. And in fact, Current.com Capitol Watch quotes Chris Healy as saying, "The more we dig into this, the worse it seems to be." So strong words there from the Republican Party, still wanting an investigation into this garbled election. We'll have the very latest on the back and forth on the Fox Connecticut News at 4 today. Until then, we'll send you back to swift justice, already in progress. Good afternoon.